Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. Welcome to the first of a four-part series on storytelling using the iThink and STELLA software's storytelling features and figuring out ways to use those that maybe you have not used them in the past. So hopefully you'll find this session here, which we're going to get into right now, an opportunity to learn new things that you can use the software for. All right, so just to set the expectations for today. What we're going to do in the next 27 minutes or so is provide lots of examples of applying the storytelling features in the software. This is going to be mostly one-way transmission, which is not the ideal, as we all know from a learning perspective, but it's the sort of the medium that we've got. Hopefully you'll walk away with some broader applications, understanding of applications and how to use the software. The intent is to give you enough information so that you can make an informed choice about the full series and whether or not you want to sign up for it. And we hope you do, of course. So while you're attending the session, I'm going to make this assumption, bold as it is. You built a STELLA, I think, mapper model, and you want to share your thinking with others. If you think about it, hopefully if that's the kind of position you're in, I think you're in the right place, because we're going to talk about how to do that. A quote I came across recently about writing, which I think relates to storytelling, and by the way, I hope you didn't come to this particular session trying to write the next Elmore Leonard novel or a Stephen King novel or something like that. We're not going to talk about those kinds of stories. We're going to talk about how you create an opportunity for learning, and I think this is this quote by Edwin Schlossberg, who has a blog that you can follow. You could learn a lot by following that blog, and one of the quotes that he wrote, I thought here was very telling. Skill of writing, skill of creating any kind of opportunity to explore mental models is creating a context in which other people can think. And I think the software tools allow you to do that. They facilitate that ability. So further about storytelling, Why We Like a Good Yarn by Jeremy Sue. That's a nice article you can also find and track down. And he made some points about narrative being a series of causally linked events that unfold over time. And that's certainly a thing that systems thinking and the software can help you to do, is to show or convey those. The best ones actually create a state called narrative transport, where people are brought into it viscerally, emotionally, as well as cognitively. And again, I think the software tools can support that. And then he says that stories can act as flight simulators for social life, and I would expand that to say that they can act as flight simulators for all of life, and thinking through how we relate to this world that we live in. And that's going to be a key theme in this particular webinar today. So just to sum it up, I would say that stories support our ability to learn together. And the stories we tell can either hopefully improve the way we live on the planet or not. So let's talk a little bit about that. How can we use the storytelling features in iThink and STELLA to help you out to do a better job with what it is that you're looking at? And the value of storytelling, from what I can see, is being able to share mental models. So let's assume that you believe, or I believe, that others could improve their mental models, and that would make a better world. So for those of you this is the first time you've seen the stock flow language, here's an accumulation. This is assumptions in the other person's mental model that are accumulating. And this is an inflow of improving those assumptions. And so let's say I believe that if I could help others, if others' mental models would improve, that would create a better world. And let's also assume that my mental model might be useful. And notice I'm emphasizing that might be useful. So you see right now we're kind of walking through a set of assumptions. I could be saying this in words, but I'm visually now depicting it, and the storytelling features allow you to do that. So let's say I wish to share my mental model with others. How am I going to do that? Well, again, I could use words, but again, visually, here's a nice way to do it, or using some of the simulation features, which we'll look at in a second. So as I share my mental model with others, there's an opportunity to have this comparison of one mental model to another, and the other might observe changes or discrepancies or differences between their mental models and the ones that I've shared. And that would then give them an opportunity to perhaps modify or improve their mental model. So there's the learning loop that we can talk about. So storytelling in STELLA and iThink can help with this process in numerous ways. So first of all, it can help because I can take my mental model, which may be fuzzy, inarticulate, and again, usually conveyed with words, and find some way to share that visually and experientially for folks. So we can embed that in a story. And then the storytelling features themselves can help improve that by doing a few things. One is because of the way that it's laid out there, it makes it easier to compare mental models. Because it's visual, again, the ability to observe the discrepancies is enhanced. Second, you can actually do it in a pace or in ways using multimedia, so sounds to ask questions or text popping up to ask questions, so that the learner, the person that you're trying to influence, can have an opportunity to raise questions in their head. And then these questions then create some sort of mental Velcro in which the information can be useful and maybe transformative. And finally, because you can create simulations and experiences where people can actually push and play and see and move things through the story, you allow the learner to pull in all parts of themselves or more parts of themselves than just sort of, again, pulling in information that you're presenting. So those are some of the features that allow you, or in this case I'm describing me if I want to influence someone else, allow me to use the storytelling features to influence others. But remember that that phrase about might. So you might be able to improve others and surface their mental model, but maybe my mental model also might need to be improved. So I have found that as I use the storytelling features to lay out and walk through trying to articulate my mental model to others, I also start to learn where maybe there's some fuzziness or some areas in there that I should change. So it allows me to see where my thinking may need some improvement. And it also, if it's done really well, when I do this interactively, and I often present in front of groups like I'm doing here, where we can have some give and take and conversation as the model's unfolding, they can raise questions that allow me to rethink, how am I approaching this and thinking about it? And so therefore, through that interaction, through that dialogue, that collective story making, I have an opportunity to improve my mental model. And so doing this allows me to improve my mental model as well, which may be even more important for creating a better world than my influencing and improving your mental model. So it's a nice sort of multiple looping process of learning that can occur, and we're going to now look at how the storytelling features in the software can actually accomplish this. Although, by the way, you are now seeing, as I've done this, sort of the ability to sort of slowly unfold this and to allow you to take it in. Many of you may have used the software a lot in the past, and as you will see, as I've unfolded this, there are no longer the little handles on the connector wires, which makes this a nice, easy-to-read graph or graphic. And one of the tricks that I'll be showing as we go forward with the series here is how I use this as a way to create nice little embedded graphics inside PowerPoint, which I'm going to go back to now. So just to summarize, using the software in the storytelling mode can help get the whole person that you're trying to influence into it, asking questions, and really engaging in a learning process. And it can also improve me as I'm also working it. And the graphic that's popped up here, as you can see, is like the graphic I was just describing without the little handles. And there's ways of using storytelling to create those graphics for you in an easy way to use for presentations. Okay, so I'd like to do another sort of description here of some of the things that you can use the software to do. And you can use it to really unfold the assumptions. And here's an example that you may have seen already, which was on taken from a story in the New York Times. I guess I'll just pull it up here. This is the easiest way to do it. By the way, please forgive me. I'm a Mac user, kind of fumbling around here on a Windows machine. So I'll do my best. But this is a graphic that was presented in response to a New York Times article where there was this picture of a spaghetti diagram, which is kind of just plopped down on the table or presented, and there was a description of why that created a lot of problems in the room and people couldn't learn from it. So here's an example where you could use the software to help people to understand more about the Afghan war counterinsurgency effort. And so here's an example of doing that as well. So you'll be able to see if you walk through this, and one of the homework assignments for you, although there's no homework for this, is to go and look at some of these online sims. Why I'm pointing this one in particular out to you is that, again, there was that diagram that was difficult to read, and a person that I heard from and said, wow, I looked at this particular storytelling version that you put together, and I learned more about the Afghan war than I learned about another effort that they had done internally for several years on a particular issue using systems thinking and system dynamics. So how do you develop these kinds of things? So I'm going to show you a little bit about how you do that using the model that I just had up there, and show you how the features work so you can see how easy this is and how it compares to PowerPoint. And then I'm going to show you another example of creating something where you can really engage a learner using storytelling and even generate feedback and reports from them. So the software works like this. You create a button where you can put in a storytelling and create the story. And when you click on this, you then get a panel. Many of you have already created animations before in PowerPoint. You get the ability to add elements to a story using using this particular feature where you click Build Story. And what happens is you're then transported to wherever you created this map. By the way, the map is laid out very specifically to be very simple so that you can communicate stuff. And so as I'm in this series that we'll do, I will show you some tricks I've learned over the years of how to create these maps in ways that are easier to convey. So what you do to create your story is you just click on the elements that you want to have in the story. So you just click on items, and you can then get this list here of the items, and you can then group them perhaps, and you can move them around. So let's say I want the better world first, and I'll say, well, I want the better world is the focus of my story, and what I want to do is to group these two together, and I also may want to insert some annotation where I say, let's say, I assume that your mental model contributes to the betterment of the world. And I've now put in text, I've moved things around, and now when I click on this little button, you see the better world pops up, you hit the space bar, and then the annotation pops up. And that's kind of the trick to developing all of these things. And so there's a lot of nuance that you can add beyond that, and I'm going to show you a lot of the things that those nuances can do right now. But I just wanted to make sure that as we move forward, you had a sense for how this works. All right. So let me show you another one that's a little bit more fleshed out. And what I want to do is I want to show you first of all, a map that we're going to work with over the course of the next few sessions around sustainability. And this is a conceptual map, and the map is right here, and it's a little overwhelming right as you see it here, and this is kind of an intro to this map right now, and over the course of the 2 to 4 sessions that are after this, we'll go into how do you convey a map like this in a way that can be helpful for thinking about sustainability in a way that people can understand concepts like carrying capacity, amount of resource that's available, and some of the externalities that are created when you intervene or when you're living in a system. So we'll talk more about this as a conceptual framework, and I'll show you how to do this shortly in the next sessions. But what we want to do now is I want to actually operationalize that a little bit more by focusing in on a particular concept around the rate of consuming of a resource. So we'll look at developing operational understanding of doing that, and you can picture, let's say you're an educator and you want to have this for your class, and you want to have students be able to follow along, and as they're learning, you want to be able to measure what they're learning or what they're experiencing. You can create something like this. So one of the things you can build in and move with the storytelling feature is you can build in movies and sounds. So right now you're seeing an example of a movie. You can't hear the sound because we're not broadcasting the audio. But you can have a movie pop up to let people know the context of what it is that they're about to learn or how they should approach things. So this is a description of how you might want to think about engaging in this as a learner from the learning process. Okay, so then you can say, all right, let's start with a stock which we'll call the renewable resource. And if you want to know a little bit more about it, you can actually embed something on there so that people can click on it. And again, as the story is unfolding, information can pop up. It can be text, but you can go a lot further than that. You can have the movies that I just showed. You can also have a graphic pop up like this. And these can help people really see and learn and understand as it moves along. All right, so we've got a renewable resource, and this outflow is called consuming. So it's like we have a bathtub of a resource, and then the outflow or the drain is an activity of consuming, which is something that occurs over time. And mental models are assumptions about the real world, and they can be represented visually here, which is nice, but it's much better to be able to actually understand how those assumptions would unfold over time. So you can give the learner or someone that's following along an opportunity to see what would happen. So they click on the simulate button, and up pops some information that says, uh-oh, you've run out of the resource. Why? So now in the process, so rather than telling somebody something, you've given them an opportunity to ask a question or to ask them a question to reflect upon. And so this again engages the learner in more real-time experience. And so you can even pop up a text box where you're asking them to input some information. So you can say, my answer is because there's no regenerating flow, right? There's nothing happening on the left-hand side here, so that's why. So that puts in there, and then it disappears. As we move forward, that'll disappear and different pops will pop up. So if you observe that there was no inflow to regenerate the stock, you're right, we're discussing renewable resources. So here we've added a renewable resource, and now if you click simulate, we've actually set it up so that the inflow and the outflow are equal, which basic bathtub dynamics suggests that if we're going to have a stock remain at the same level or the same level in a bathtub, the inflows and the outflows have to be equal. You'll be surprised how many people don't pick that up, though, until you sort of lay it out there. All right, so now we can start to unfold and tease out the mental model a little bit more, and again, help the learner do that. So what's the nature of this regeneration? What causes it? Again, posing a question. And I'm sure many of you who've used the software know or are thinking that it's the renewable resource that's doing it. So the amount of the resource creates more. Again, forests get more forests, shrimp create more shrimp. Whatever the resource is can create itself or is self-sustaining. So, and you could create or you could build in here an assumption about what the growth percentage is. So for each unit of the resource, some percent is added per year. So what if regeneration percent were slightly less than that required for equilibrium? So we've actually set this up so that the equilibrium is maintained if the resource regenerates at a 10% annual clip. So if we did this now, it would just be a flat line like the 2 line that you see over here. But if I change this to a 5, and again, the learner can do this at their own pace, and then simulate, you can see, oh, we're going to run out of it. So what would you expect to happen to the renewable resource or regeneration percent or less than the equilibrium condition? Well, they could have typed this in ahead of time, or they could type it in here now, but I see that we run out of it. Okay, so again, you're getting some more feedback. This is a two-way street, and I want to make sure that I put this back at 10, so I actually put in a prompt there so that the learner and I don't forget. I just want to hover over it again to make sure it took. Okay, it did. All right, so now let's turn our attention to the consuming flow. So what is a way of characterizing the nature of consuming? Well, one way to think about it is that people, which we're often called consumers after all, create the consumption. They're responsible for how much is consumed per year of something like shrimp. And the annual consumption per person, which is often a per capita use, is also what's needed. So if you know the number of people and the average amount of resource consumed per person per year, you can figure out how much total is being consumed per year. So now what happens if we have this setup here? Any guesses? Okay, so it hangs flat, and that's because we've got this set up in a steady state mode so that this times this is the same as this regeneration reinforcing loop here. All right, so now we can move on and say, well, what causes population growth? And right here we're assuming that population is growing at some annual percentage clip. And what can you say about that? Well, again, it's kind of like the renewable resource. It's responsible for creating more of itself. So what happens with a population growth percent of 3% annually? Does this make sense? Why or why not? So, make some guesses ahead of time. What do you think would happen? And then the learner can type in a number, and we can simulate. Oops, we run out. And again, I see, running out seems like, the pop loop is dominating. So you can put some information in and let the learner kind of see what's going on, and then you could also provide some pretty instant feedback on that using another feature of storytelling, which is the highlight feature. So you can build into your stories the ability for, as it's unfolding, to revisit important linkages. So you can see renewable resource loop and then the population loop as it's unfolding here. So you can highlight particular portions of the map to people, and that's a feature which we'll cover more about in the future as well. All right. So we've kind of come to the end of this particular phase where we've tried to develop an operational understanding of how this might work. But now the question is, well, let's assume that we're going to be stuck with or think that we need to have a 3% annual population growth, or we often talk about GDP growing at 3% annually. So let's assume that this growth rate continues. How would we need to reduce the resource consumed per person per year to do that? So I've moved over here from storytelling to another place, but it's kind of seamless to the learner, and an opportunity for them to type in or to put in an assumption about how much do we need to reduce consumption per person per year. So we're reducing per capita consumption here to almost 50% of its levels at the beginning over the course of 40 years. So what do you think will happen? So my observations are reducing to 50% creates, and then simulate it out. Oops, that's not enough. Okay, so I need to do more. Okay, and so you can kind of have the learner kind of play with this a little bit and see that it's going to have to be quite a dramatic drop in these rates here, particularly early on, to make sure that we don't run out of a resource. So you can create an experience rather than telling somebody, wow, if we have even what's considered a fairly modest growth rate of something like population or, again, say GDP that has an impact on the environment, it may require quite a substantial reduction in the per capita usage or the per capita impact. And this is the whole idea of decoupling the economy from environmental impacts and how possible that is or not. So you've been able to, rather than just tell somebody that, you're giving them an opportunity to learn that and to also create graphs which can then be printed. So that can be printed um, so they can pull that up. Or you can even, we've saved all the information into a report that's been generated by all these little text boxes, and so they can be printed out and handed in as well. So from an educator point of view, this is quite phenomenal. But you can also, again, if you're not an educator, you can still create these types of things where you're able to let people experience and understand sort of at their pace. And again, hopefully by engaging more than just telling them, but by giving them the opportunity to type in, to make changes, to experiment, to see things visually, to work with the multimedia and all those kinds of aspects. So hopefully that kind of demonstrates that. And just before we go here, which is in a couple of minutes, I just want to highlight a few more of these storytelling modules that you can look at online. So there's 3 of them, and the first one here was on the counterinsurgency piece. There's another one on looking at oil and oil usage. And for those of you that have developed lots of STELLA, iThink models with control panels, one of the things that I've used this software for is to, when people click on question marks or trying to understand what a particular control panel item is to actually use storytelling to unfurl what that's doing. And so here's a picture example of that. I think many of you who build control panels will find that a very useful thing. Again, rather than telling people assumptions, they can actually see them. Here's another NetSim. This was created by a good friend of mine, Linda Buswini, and I, looking at a Thomas Friedman column. And we actually hired an artist to develop graphics that unfurl as the stock flow diagram unfurls. And again, this is a real nice way for the learner to see things in a way that hopefully captures their imagination and their learning styles a little bit better. So all of those things can be found at the link that's shown here, and I hope that you'll have an opportunity to look at those perhaps between now and hopefully when you come to the next sessions. So let me just kind of summarize some of the many uses and features of the software that I've highlighted today, and which we'll actually go into in greater depth of how you use them in the future. So helping to link behavior to structure, I think, is very important, and I just spent a lot of time on that with the resource one. Building in multimedia, actually having sounds walk people through maps is a great way to do it, rather than again pop-up text. Helping people get information where they can actually input it and respond to things using the text boxes, as I also just demonstrated. It's a great thing to do. And then obviously sharing online is great. So some of the software features I talked about today are highlighting breaks, annotations, how you group objects. I showed that. There's ways to put chapters together so that you can actually remove simulate buttons, and that's what happened all the way through that renewable resource piece, is that the simulate button disappeared as a new chapter was added. So it really makes it easy to do those things. You can have objects appearing. And I just want to end this by popping back up to the 50,000-foot level. At least for me, the reason I really like to use the STELLA and iThink software is because I'm trying to work with a lot of people who are at different levels, but all trying to influence systems that they're part of. And one of my people that I look up to the most is Dana Meadows. And in talking about intervening in a system, she had a set of leverage points. And there were many of them in there, including looking for feedback loops and information flows, etc. But her top 2 were changing paradigms and having the ability to change paradigms. And for me, this software doesn't, make that actually, perfect. There's a lot of other things that are required to do that, like engaging in dialogue and reflection and experiencing things. But the storytelling features really really enhance, when I'm working with people, the ability to kind of surface and also create opportunities for changing paradigms. So to me, that's sort of the big picture, the big so what, the big to-do. So I really want to thank you all for being at this this sort of rapid fire hose sort of ingestion of storytelling. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us or email us, email me. Happy to answer them for you. Hopefully in the next few weeks you'll have an opportunity to look at those net sims that I mentioned. Please contact if you've got questions, and I hope to see you at the full series in a few weeks when we have that. So in a couple of weeks I'd like to see you. Before then, remember to do these actions. By the way, you'll be able to download the slides from here. We'll put these slides up for you if you want to be able to download them after this, so you can follow along and do these actions, as well as the movies will be available to follow along with. So if you sign up for the course, there's a discussion forum, so actively engage in that. And the old joke that I use all the time, which is getting really tired here, but how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. So develop lots of these maps and models, put storytelling in, share them with people, let them help influence your thinking, and as you do, hopefully we will be building that better world that I talked about at the very beginning. So thanks a lot. Appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.